Android 14 is coming, bringing new features, better battery life and security. There's quite a bit to see in this first developer preview, but as usual, most of the really interesting changes are things Google's not really talking about just yet. But don't worry, because we've got you covered. I'm Alex Toby, this is XDA-TV, let's get into it. So first of all, the most important news of all on Android 14, the dessert codename is indeed Upside Down Cake, as rumored, because Android 14 is Android U. I don't think I've ever eaten an upside down cake, but if you're curious, then this is what one looks like. With that out of the way, we'll get to some of the stuff we've discovered in the first developer preview. Most of these come from the excellent Michelle Rahman, who's been rounding up undocumented or hidden features in this build for us here at XDA. Fair warning, this doesn't necessarily mean this stuff will make it to the final version of Android 14. Google hasn't announced these features, though we can see that they are working on them. First, Google might be making more changes to the way the back gesture works. Support for a predictive back animation was added in Android 13, but apps have to specifically enable it for it to work. Basically how it works that if a back gesture is going to trigger an app to quit back to the home screen, you'll get this little peek animation so you can kind of see what's going on, but this is only if an app enables it. In Android 14, Google's already said they intend for this to be the default behavior for the back gesture in all apps, but it also seems like another predictive back gesture may be added for going back between levels within an app. This needs to be enabled in developer options and the app needs to be built to support it, but here you can see how it might work thanks to a screen recording by Michelle. Obviously, good chance the animation stuff you see here may change between now and launch. It's a small change, but it should make going back on Android a bit less unpredictable. Carrier and manufacturer preloaded apps are a sometimes unfortunate fact of life on Android, but Android 14 might let users take back a bit more control over the junk apps that they don't want. There's a hidden settings page in the current Android 14 preview called Apps Installed in the Background. You need to flip a developer flag to enable it and view it within a special version of the settings app, but it's there. This new official way for your manufacturer to install apps in the background could be powered by a new background install control service, and that in turn could be tied into this new menu. It's also rumored this service will power many features in Android 15, so I'll have to see how that pans out, but at least we'll have a place to see and uninstall any potential bloatware. The ability to convert from a physical SIM to an eSIM, essentially suck out your SIM's data and install it into your phone's internal eSIM, had previously been rumored for a future version of Android, but now there's more evidence to suggest it will be coming in Android 14 on the Pixel 8. There's a currently empty settings value for a convert to eSIM feature, and Michelle Rahman says there'll also be an option for moving eSIMs between Android devices. So hopefully Android 14 will make the eSIM switching experience as simple as it is on iOS. But this likely won't apply to every carrier and SIM to begin with. The networks will need to work with Google to enable this feature. Many Android brands like Samsung include an option to create a second copy of certain apps, usually social media or messaging apps, so you can use them with multiple accounts. One classic example is WhatsApp, which normally only allows one account at a time. And it seems like this feature might be coming to Android 14 as a whole, after Google started laying the foundations in Android 12. Michelle has unearthed a hidden menu for creating a cloned instance of certain apps, so you can use them in just the same way as you would on a Samsung phone. You'll have a second copy that'll appear as a separate entry in the launcher. All the pieces of this feature aren't quite in place yet. For instance, the launcher integration isn't complete, but just the fact that the UI for this exists is a promising sign that we might see it in Android 14. And Google could be building on the app-specific language feature added in Android 13 with a new regional preferences menu covering everything from temperature units to calendar type and first day of the week. The menu to control all this is hidden behind a developer flag at present, but the idea is this information could be passed on to apps so they don't need to include options for themselves. Meanwhile, Google might be continuing the trend of locking down apps' access to all your photos and other media. The new Universal Photo Picker introduced with Android 13 addressed this to an extent, but now in Android 14, a hidden feature in the current build appears to let you restrict photos that apps can access even if they aren't using the Photo Picker. If this makes it to release, it'll make it function a bit more like iOS and mean better security for the photos on your device. And just as Google prepares to launch its first Android tablet in 8 years, there are signs Android could be getting better keyboard support. Based on a hidden keyboard settings page, it could be possible to remap certain keys like Control and Alt, and there are new APIs for controlling keyboard backlights. Most interestingly, touchpad support looks to be improving with new settings for gestures. Currently, this is set up in this hidden menu mainly to use a 3 or 4 fingered swipe for various things, left or right to go back, up to go home, and down to view notifications, plus a 4 fingered swipe for changing apps. Maybe something we'll see in a potential Pixel tablet keyboard attachment? We'll just have to wait and see. Now let's take a quick look over some of the features that are actually confirmed and announced by Google, because there are a few even at this early stage. The first couple of these should help to boost Android security. In Android 14, it'll no longer be possible to directly install apps built to target anything older than Android 6 Marshmallow. That's because a lot of malicious apps behave in this way to try and get around the tighter security in newer versions. Basically saying, hey, I know you're Android 13, but I want to play by the rules of Android 5. These older versions were much less strict about things like location and file system access. Google already limits which OS versions apps on the Play Store are allowed to target, but now there'll be a system-level limit too, affecting APK files downloaded onto the device or via some other app store. Advanced users can still sideload older apps by plugging in and using command line though, so if you've really got to play some Flappy Bird, that'll still be possible, at least for now. Also, root certificates will be updatable via a Google Play System Update. These are the certificates that make it possible to use the internet securely, but if one of the bodies that issues them is compromised, that's potentially very bad. Android owners will need to wait for an over-the-air update to fix this. With Android 14, it's updatable without upgrading the entire OS, so it's easier to push these updates out with a Google Play System Update. Finally, though there aren't a ton of design changes in Android 14 right now, outside of some small tweaks to the quick settings area, there are a couple of visual things to touch on. Google is bumping up the maximum text zoom level to 200% and adding non-linear scaling support. Basically means that text that was smaller gets boosted quite a lot, whereas headings and other text that was already large doesn't get ridiculously huge. And Android is getting better support for gendered languages like French and German thanks to a new grammatical inflection API. Basically makes sure the system knows the gender of the user so it can say and ask things in a more grammatically correct way. So those are the main things we're seeing right now in Developer Preview 1. It's worth saying again though that these features, and especially the hidden features dug up by Michelle's hard work, aren't guaranteed to make it to the final release. All this means is there's evidence in Android 14 right now that Google's working on it behind the scenes. We'll likely see a more complete picture of Android 14 as it enters the public beta stage, usually around the Google I/O conference this May, ahead of the eventual launch probably in August. Drop us a like and make sure you're subscribed for more Android 14 in future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.